Well, you have early risers. All right, why don't we get started? I'll spend a little time with an introduction and hopefully some other folks will join us. I apologize for the neglected to turn off the beeping when people enter. We'll get that right next time. We're just delighted that you've joined us this afternoon. This is our first major presentation, our first part of a three-part series on grandparenting today, the joys, opportunities, and challenges. Over 100 people signed up for these three seminars, these three discussions, which says one or two things to us. One is that there is growing excitement about the importance of engaging grandparents as part of our new Jewish family and grandparents as essential members of our Jewish communities, or alternatively, people have run out of things to watch on Netflix. So we're both very excited about this and a little nervous. After all, we're all grandparents and we're adapting to new media as quickly as we can. So I apologize in advance for any kind of technical difficulties. You'll excuse us, we're running as fast as our aged knees will carry us. Some housekeeping. So all participants should be muted. If you're not, please mute yourself. What we don't want to happen is that there to be a cacophony of dogs and phone ringing and beeps and emails. If you'd like to ask a question, please open the chat box, which is on the right of your screen and should be able to do that with a little chat button on the bottom of your screen. When you roll over it, you'll see it. When you put something in the chat box, unless you specify, everybody will read what it says. Therefore, if you're sending a message to a secret lover, this is probably not the time to do it. And we're hoping that you'll ask questions of our panelists. The way today will work is that we have three really lovely, extraordinary panelists, and we're very, very lucky. And we've prepared some questions in advance for them, and we'll spend about a half hour asking questions. Afterwards, we invite you to post your questions on chat. Just write them on chat, and I'll be able to see them, and I'll answer them in turn. I want to just begin by saying that we're really delighted to co-sponsor this presentation by 18 Doors, which is a wonderful, wonderful organization, and we're just delighted to partner with them. So with that, I'd like to introduce this three just wonderful people. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, when I say the name of the speaker, just say hello so your name will pop up so people could see you. So Alyx, could you say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Alyx is a first-year student studying history and Talmud at Barnard College and at the Jewish Theological Seminary. She is a passionate activist for queer rights and feminism, and she is a member of the board of Keshet. Roger?
Hi, this is me.
Roger is a retired pastor in the United Methodist Church. With his wife, his son Jim, and daughter recently celebrated his grandson Zev's bar mitzvah virtually. Is that right?
That's right.
And then finally, Becky.
Hi.
Hi. So Becky Sowemimo.
So close.
I apologize. Is the Associate Director for 18 Doors in Atlanta. And she and her husband, Femi, both broke the wine glass and jumped the broom in their wedding. And they are expecting their first child this October. So to begin the questions. So in the Jewish Grandparents Network, we use the term the new Jewish family to express the changes we have seen in the composition of our families. Now, when I was growing up, all Jewish families looked kind of the same. They had a mother and a father who were both Jewish and who were both white. Today, that family now represents the minority of Jewish households. Can each of you tell us a little bit about your roles and experiences as part of, quote, the new Jewish family? and invite whoever. Becky, you're on the screen now, so maybe you'll go first.
Okay, great. So first of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to everyone today. So I was raised Reform in the Reform Judaism, and my husband Femi is African American, and he was raised in the Church of God, but is now, let's call him agnostic because we all love labels. So let's call him agnostic. So that's kind of our identity of our Jewish family. And right now the plan is to raise our daughter Jewish.
Great. Alyx, would you like to talk next?
Yeah, so I have two Jewish parents, but I came from an Orthodox conservative, would now probably more identify as conservative background. My grandparents live several thousand miles away. They're in London and Cape Town, and I myself am transgender, and also have close family members who are interfaith families as well.
Roger, could you tell us about your part of the Jewish family?
Thanks for having me. I'm, as David said, I'm a Methodist minister, retired. Our son converted to Judaism and is married to a rabbi who's the daughter of a rabbi. And they are obviously raising their children Jewish. And but we live just a few blocks from where they live. We just recently moved to New York City to be somewhat closer to family. And so that's what the configuration looks like.
Great. So, Roger, in talking about your son's conversion to Judaism and marrying a rabbi, you spoke of a journey of constantly opening doors that we didn't know were closed. Becky, in the same conversation, you commented, it's been small battles all along to cement our identities, both as individuals and as a couple. Would any or all of you like to share your experiences both of opening doors and small battles?
I think to talk about opening doors, I think one of the first doors is the door of imagination. Lee Handler on your website begins by saying, these aren't the families we imagined 40 years ago. And when Jim told us that he was converting and would be marrying Rahel, we had to open just the doors of our imagination to see what a new family would look like. And but it's also been, I think, as we've moved into trying to share as much as possible holidays and other things, probably the best thing about it has been Jim and Rahel and their children and Rahel's parents, who happen to be guests on this site today. They've opened the doors for us. They've been very hospitable to us and have made it work in many ways. But it has also led us into, cultural. We've read books we wouldn't have read. We have seen plays we wouldn't have seen, heard music we wouldn't have heard. There's so much that has enriched our lives because of this change in our lives.
Great.
Yeah, for me, we talked about this on our call last week that, let's see, when Femi and I got together, my mother was not happy he was Black, and his mother was not happy I was Jewish. So we had a bit of an uphill battle from the start. And so Femi and I have kind of been used to defending our relationship from the beginning. teaching people to look outside of kind of these bullet points that people see when they first meet someone, and really just in terms of our identity, I have been able to introduce Femi, unfortunately, to the world of anti-Semitism. He was not as aware of how often it occurs, and Femi helped me kind of really discover my white privilege. And so we've really taught each other a lot about the different worlds we came from and how to make that work together. And then in terms of our identity as a couple, it's been really nice because Femi isn't afraid to ask me why a certain Jewish tradition is the way that it is and why it can't be changed in a way that is more meaningful to us. So that has been a really fun journey to really look at different traditions and how to make them meaningful to us as a couple, and not just have to say, well, this is the way I've always done it, so this is the way I have to keep doing it.
Becky, I want to ask you a follow-up question, if
Sure.
you may, based on something you said. In what ways, so you're somebody who's really devoted to Jewish life, both personally and in your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
In what ways has Femi's own religious and cultural background kind of elevated your own sense of Jewish identity, your own Jewish expression?
Great question. I think immediately about the Soul Food Seder we have hosted the last 2 years. So we wrote a Passover Haggadah together that talked about our shared ancestry of slavery, really acknowledging that that's something that comes from both of our histories, our shared histories. You know, finding unique ways to, so we're making, you know, mac and cheese noodle kugel, and things like that, just fun ways to really bring different traditions to the table. Our wedding had a lot of great traditions you mentioned in my bio. So we jumped the broom, which is an African-American wedding tradition. And as we landed down from jumping on the broom, we both stepped on a glass, just like the Jewish tradition. So we do things like that. We wrote our own blessing to go inside the mezuzah that's on our door. You know, our own home blessing. That way we kind of put our own spin on it. Our ketubah we signed in English. So that was an interesting conversation because Femi doesn't have a Jewish name. So, or a Hebrew name, I should say. And he felt that if he looked at our ketubah that had Hebrew names written on the bottom that he couldn't read, that it would really distance him from the meaning of the document itself. So we signed in English. And just little things like that make sure we are both represented in what it is that we're doing.
Great. Alyx, we talked a little bit about opening and closing of doors and fighting battles. Could you talk about your experience coming out specifically to your family and more broadly, what were some of the things that went well? What were some of the things that perhaps were difficult? And perhaps even to talk a little bit about your grandparents' role, on your grandparents' reaction.
Yeah, so when I came out, I actually didn't take the lead in telling my family. My parents did. That was a choice we just made for my mental health. But you know, when they spoke to, and I think what it was about was just having really honest and open conversations, letting people ask questions and being open to that. And I mean, within my family, I'm really lucky to say that it went very well. I can't, you know, my grandparents, I don't know how they reacted in the moment, but when I saw them next, you know, they were very happy and supportive, and they are on my team 100%. You know, they sometimes slip up. They make mistakes with my pronouns and my new name, my name. Sometimes, even now, 4 years later, and I don't get, I think some people have a really visceral reaction to that, and that's really hard for them. I'm lucky enough that I don't get that reaction. But, they are always, they don't mean it. And I know they don't mean it. And they, they always apologize when they notice it, and more often than not, scolding each other. And they, I know that they're here for me. And one of the conversations I had with them that was really illuminating was actually my cousin said to me, like, my cousins live with them, and she said to me, like, they were happy after you came out because you were happy. And like, that's ultimately, I think, what every grandparent wants, ideally, for their grandkids. And, it's not always 100% easy, but I think just having conversations is very important. And also keeping in mind that, it might get tense and it might get stressful, but that this is a family, and that we all do want what's best for each other. And that goes both ways.
So this question wasn't on our list, so I apologize, Alex. I'm going to ask you another question. So when we talk about grandparents, we have a sense that grandparents have a very special relationship with their grandkids. That's different than the relationship between a child and a parent. Lee Handler, our president of our advisory committee and co-founder, sometimes talks about it as being a transactional relationship between parents and their children. And Lisa Miller, who wrote The Spiritual Child, wrote about the very special spiritual relationship, or the grandparent as a spiritual guide. Is there a way that you could you spoke about it a little bit, but a little about the different reaction of let's say your parents and your grandparents to you when you came out?
Yeah. So I think, like, with my parents, it was a lot more immediate, given that we were in the same space, and it was a lot longer of a conversation, as far as I know. And part of the conversation with my parents was just figuring out what to do about it. And whereas my grandparents, like, they, when I told them, I think they also had time, because again, they don't live with me. We didn't see each other for a few months after that. But I think that the way our relationship is we don't get to see each other very often, and that makes the time we do spend together very precious. And I think that, the fact that they were accepting and supporting straight away was like a big deal for me. And I think it was, it's a big deal it was a big deal for my uncle when he came out in the 1980s to them, to his parents, his parents and my grandparents, cousins. It's a big deal. And I think that I was really glad when I saw them next that everything was, that we still had, that they were still on board and they were still ready to support me.
That's great. Terrific. Thank you. Roger, in a beautiful essay you wrote, which is on our website, a good host says and means, my house is your house. A bad host makes you feel like an intruder in 1,000 thoughtless ways. Starting with Alex, would you share stories of metaphorical good hosts and stories of bad hosts that you've experienced? So actually, I'm going to ask Roger to maybe begin with that.
I'm sorry,
yeah, Roger, you will begin. Yeah.
I think part of that, I think this is one thing the Abrahamic religions have in common, is this concept of hospitality. And a good host gives you space to be yourself. And I think we found that in being welcomed into our Jewish family. We hope we've done the same with them, where they can be true to their faith and practice their faith as freely with us as they would if we weren't there. And I think I guess that's what I'd like to say. I mean, the bad host is just the person who just doesn't acknowledge that you're any different than he is, and
the one
so,
who orders the pizza over with anchovies, right?
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. There was one case where this person ordered pizza with anchovies on it. Never asked, "Hey, do you like anchovies?" or what do you want on the pizza? It was just he liked them, so why not? And I paid for half of the pizza as well.
Becky, I ask you a question about good hosts and bad hosts, and then I have a follow-up question I'd like to ask you when you're done with that answer. What experience have you had with good hosts and bad hosts?
So one thing that Roger just said that really stood out to me is the good hosts allowing you to be yourself. I remember, may have been the second year that Femi and I were together. We attended a family reunion of his in Ohio. So Femi's mother is one of 12 children. So he has a big extended family. And I was aware that I was going to be the only, white person there. And I am a lot. So in terms of being myself, I'm a lot of myself pretty much all the time. So I was concerned. I mean, our relationship has existed completely in the South, and being interracial in the South, can be hard. Speaking of bad hosts, of all places, Waffle House, they were not kind hosts to us when Femi and I shared a quick kiss sitting at the diner counter, and we got a look from one of the servers that was filled with pure hatred, and that did not make us feel great. But on the flip side, going to Femi's family reunion, it was so lovely. Everyone in his family has always been so kind, so welcoming, so open. And then on the flip side, Femi realizes that being with a Jewish professional means that you often have to be there +1 at certain Jewish professional events. I try to pick and choose which ones I think he should go to, because if he came to all of them, that's too much. And so I'm happy that the events he has attended, it's been the same for him. I don't believe anyone's ever asked him if he's converting or things that can be really triggering when you are a person who doesn't identify as Jewish in a Jewish space. Obviously, there are the assumptions. Since he is a person of color, the assumption is that he doesn't identify as Jewish. That's a whole other can of worms that you can't really control in certain spaces. But I fully believe he's the kind of person that would stop showing up to things if he didn't feel welcome. And because he is still open and happy to attend these events, it makes me feel really good to know that in general, the Atlanta Jewish community has been good hosts to our relationship.
So I want to ask Alyx to answer the good host, bad host question. Then I want to get back to a follow-up question to all of you. Alyx, do you have a good host and bad host experience?
Yeah, I think part of my family experience is I have a family member who married someone who wasn't Jewish, and other members of my family reacted badly to that. And it means that family gatherings, if they happen, can be, there aren't great hosts, and they can be tense and difficult. And yet, I think when we do all come together, and it does happen, it's rare, but it does happen. There's just something really magical about the way all of us as like the grandkids, it's all come together, and I mean, like, you know, I mean, when we all came when we were last in the UK, we all came to my grandparents' house, all of the grandkids, and it was a really beautiful experience because, you know, we don't get to hang out together a lot, and we all love each other, and it was amazing to be in the same space. Yeah.
Great. I want to just remind, we have one question, which I will get to in a minute, but I just want to remind people that if they do have questions, please post them in the chat. I'm going to stop asking questions in about 5 minutes, so people, and we'll hopefully respond to your questions. So for our three presenters, what are some of the things that, let's say, grandparents, and perhaps two, our Jewish community can do to be good hosts? So Roger, Becky, and Alex, whoever would like to answer first. What could we do as grandparents or as the Jewish representatives of the Jewish community to be good hosts?
I think part of it is to see your children and grandchildren as guests, that there's people, these unique human beings come into this world, and you don't know who they are at first, and you spend your whole life watching them unfold, and but I think it's paying attention to who they are, and trying to create an emotional environment, even a physical environment, if it's possible, you know, that makes them feel comfortable and welcome.
Great.
I think it's about not making assumptions. I've been to plenty of houses where they assume I don't eat pork because I'm Jewish, and it is an assumption made with the best of intentions. Hey, maybe I would have liked some pork, whatever you would have served that night, you know, maybe we all missed out on some good pork. But so yeah, not making assumptions, and also this connects to something that Alex said earlier. When the mistake or the oops moment happens, just acknowledging it and moving through it, you know, not necessarily dwelling on it. So like she was saying, if somebody messes up her pronoun, or if somebody makes a certain comment or whatever, just acknowledge it. Let's move on forward, because nobody's perfect, and no gathering is going to be perfect. But a lot of times what people need in order to move forward is an acknowledgement that whatever happened, and then just saying, okay, and moving forward.
Great. Alex, do you want to address that question at all?
Yeah, I mean, Becky said some things, a lot of very great things. And I also just want to add, like, I think the best way of getting past assumptions is having conversations. They don't have to be, you know, conversations about the future of the nation or anything. Just talking about, like, asking what people need, asking, you know, it doesn't hurt to ask. And I think being and engaging with people honestly and openly is the best way to kind of create healthy and productive relationships.
Great. I'm going to take a quick, we have another question, but some questions that have come in. Let's start out by Becky. One question was, what exactly does your organization do? And then I'm going to have a follow-up question for Alex, who's on the board of directors of Keshet, to talk about what Keshet does. So Becky, why don't you talk a little bit about 18 Doors?
I would be happy to. Tammy, thank you so much for that question. So we are so 18 Doors is a national organization. I represent the Innovation Hub City in Atlanta, but we're a national organization based out of Boston that provides resources to Jewish interfaith families. I'll say in person in quotes, but so at this point, virtual touch points. as well as online resources, blog posts, social media. We have a website, a totally revamped website that I can post in the chat that provides support, resources, information, guidance. A lot of times Jewish interfaith families feel like they're on an island, and simply bringing them together so that they can speak to one another about their unique joys and challenges can really help create a sense of community. We have an awesome referral service for people looking for clergy for life cycle events. That was kind of that's been our flagship program since we started in 99, because as you can imagine, in 1999, there were a lot fewer clergy people who were willing to officiate at interfaith life cycle services, life cycle events, than there are now. So we have curated a list of clergy across the country who perform interfaith life cycle events. So that's another huge piece that we do. And during the pandemic, really, we've been trying to bring different groups together to talk about how they can keep ritual going in their household during this time, and also just to find community, just to talk to each other and find community during this tough time.
Great. Alex, can you talk for a moment about Keshet?
Yes. Keshet is a national LGBTQ Jewish organization that really works for the full inclusion of LGBTQ Jews in the Jewish community. We do a lot of different programmings. Some of it is tailored towards teens. We have a really successful Shabbaton program that engages teens from all over the country. We also do training and work with major Jewish organizations, federations, youth groups, more and more. And we do, and you can go on Keshet social media and see just the incredible work that Keshet do to really change the Jewish community and start conversations about how LGBTQ Jews can be both a celebrated and welcome part of the Jewish community.
Great. We had a question from Lee saying, what have you learned about your family during this pandemic that may be surprised or disappointed you, that may have surprised or disappointed you? That would be for all of our guests, panelists. What have you learned about your family during this pandemic that may have surprised or disappointed you or delighted you? Anybody?
I think one of the things that's delighted us is because we are relatively close, and we've been able to walk over to our son's house and with some social distancing, sit on their porch and have conversations in person instead of just on a screen. Plus, our son helps us out. I actually am a pretty high-risk person, and so he picks up groceries for us that can't be delivered otherwise.
Becky, would you want to add to that anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say during this pandemic, because I am almost 5 months pregnant now, like that is basically all I'm talking about with my family is just how to kind of prepare, sharing advice and things like that. I will say this has been a cool way to connect with the younger people in our family, our nieces and nephews. You know, a lot of times we connect with them through our siblings, obviously, with, you know, much parental supervision. But now Femi has 4 nieces on his side. His sister has 4 daughters, and they'll FaceTime him throughout the day, kind of not understanding the 9-to-5 job cycle that some of us are still working, but they'll FaceTime him during the day, and it's been really delightful to form our own relationships with them through these virtual means. But we've always been in close connection with our family. I'm happy to say that nothing so far has disappointed me. I don't believe that. I mean, I guess it's hard to keep my mother in the house. I try so hard, And she will FaceTime me from her friend's house, and I will say, "What are you doing? Why are you there?" So sometimes it's hard because my mother is her own person. I am my mother's daughter, so I totally understand. But so that part is, so it's not so much disappointing as it is just, you just gotta shrug your shoulders and say, we're all adults here, so she's gonna do what she wants to do.
Roger, I want to ask a question that we spoke about, but I have a pre-question question. I was thinking back of the first time I met my in-laws, and then why I didn't talk to them for the next 4 months. And everybody has a different experience when they first meet their in-laws, or we call them nalachatanin. So when you met Rachel, your daughter-in-law's parents, her dad is a rabbi.
Right.
So we have a minister. That there's something of a, all we need is like an imam, walking into a bar. So a rabbi
Exactly.
and a rebbitzin and a minister and his wife sitting around the table, meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
You described it beautifully, but tell us a little bit about what that was like, meeting another person who had committed his life to faith, but a different faith.
It was a wonderful experience. It was certainly, we entered into it with some trepidation, as I think they did, but very quickly became very comfortable with each other. And probably the best part of it was we went to their house for Thanksgiving, and in York, Pennsylvania, where Rahel's dad was the rabbi at the temple there, and so he took us. He and Joyce took us to the temple to see it, and as we were looking at it, we were standing by the bima, and Erwin said, "Well, it looks like our kids are going to get married." And we all sat down and we had this wonderful 2-hour conversation about what this meant to us at a really deep level, or what it meant, what we felt about the decisions they were making, what they were facing, but also how we all were supportive of them.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask that we had spoke about is, what is it about your approach to life that enabled you to embrace and to celebrate your son and daughter-in-law and the choices that they made, even though those choices were very different than the ones that you and your wife had committed to during your entire lives?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and this is not what comes up for me is the moment when Jim went through the actual conversion service, and he asked that each of us stand with him, and we stood on either side of him as he went through the ritual. And that ritual is not easy for a parent from the other faith to hear, because it requires the convert to renounce who they were when we, who they were, in a sense, and their faith, their old faith, and that sort of thing. And in thinking about how we got through this, Jackie and I were talking about it, and we said it's a journey of the head and the heart. And for her reaction, her immediate reaction was, as she says, God wouldn't want me to stop loving my son because he became Jewish. Besides, she wouldn't want that anyway. And for me, it was much more of I had to work it out theologically. But I think part of that is we have another son, and when he came home from a very diverse college, he said to me, "Dad, I don't understand why I feel I have more in common with Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims who take their faith seriously than I have with Methodists who don't." And I think it is somehow this sense of something big that we all try to find a language for. I keep thinking of Mary Oliver talking about being married to wonder or something. I don't know, can't remember exactly how she puts it, but she's a poet. She had a language for it. My language is my religion. Other people do the same. And I think that I think it's to believe that this God, whoever God is something that can't be contained in just these things we call religion, these containers, the boxes that we call religion. But and so I think that's I guess that's my approach to life.
Great. We have some more questions for Roger, but I'm going to get back to them in the question because I wanted to ask a question of Alyx. So you're on the board of Keshet, you spoke about it, and you mentioned that you hear from other transgender individuals that for many grandparents, this is a new phenomenon. And it is certainly a new phenomenon for me. And sometimes grandparents get confused and sometimes make mistakes with pronouns you spoke of, and it can be painful. So what guidance can you give us to help navigate this unfamiliar terrain?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I could explain it in psychological terms because I did just pass my introduction to psychology course. But it's hard to kind of learn new concepts as we get older. And so I think part of what it is just like, is part of it is conversations and saying, listen, I might do this. And I might screw up, and I'm sorry in advance, and also apologizing when you realize it happens, and I'm trying, right? And just, I think, like Becky said, just apologizing quickly and being aware of what's happening is as best you can is important as well. And, just, it's also not going to be easy for a grandkid to hear that from their grandparent. And it's, as much as you might not feel that you are, because, it's a mistake. Mistakes can hurt and mistakes can cause discomfort and pain. And I don't think any of us want that. And so, just being aware that it's not easy for anyone, and trying to have, and be honest and accountable, and also try and, be honest with yourself. And again, all comes back to just having honest and open conversations.
So I have two more quick questions. I think, Alyx, it was you who alluded to when families get together. But so Roger and Becky, and maybe Alyx, when your family get together, let's say for Hanukkah / Christmas / Easter / Pesach, you have folks who have different systems of belief. You have two sons, one of whom may be observing Christmas, another who may be observing Hanukkah, and Becky may play out the same few. So how does it play out in the larger family system? And not just between direct relationship between you and the one child, but you and the nature of the relationship between the children, all the children and their families, and the extended family, aunts and uncles.
I think, go ahead, Becky. Yeah.
I was just going to say that so far it has been about whose home we're in. So whoever's home we're in, that is whose direction we take in terms of what we are doing from an observance perspective. I will say that we haven't, as of yet, kind of crossed the streams, as it were. Like Femi's family hasn't come to a Passover Seder yet. And, there are members of my family, because my step family doesn't identify as Jewish. So I do celebrate Christmas with members of my Jewish family to respect their, this is Christmas in like the most secular meaning of the word. So we're opening stockings and watching Christmas Vacation and things like that. But I'm assuming when we have our daughter, there will be more of an opportunity to introduce our families to different things, like inviting Femi's family to a baby naming for our daughter and explaining, why she'll have a Hebrew name and things like that. But so far, we haven't necessarily done a lot of, besides our wedding. I mean, our wedding was the big opportunity to be able to introduce Femi's extended family to Jewish wedding traditions. And the rabbi who married us, who's my boss, who's the director of 18 Doors Atlanta, Rabbi Packer Monroe, did a fantastic job, because it wasn't just our family. There were plenty of our friends who don't identify as Jewish who want to feel connected to what we're doing in our ceremony. So it's just about explanation and patience and really experiencing the joy in what it is you're sharing with your family.
Great. Well, I have one last question, and unless some other questions show up. Becky, you said in a recent conversation, our relationship has made me a richer person, your relationship with Femi. I'd love to hear from all of you. I'd like to hear your thoughts about how our new Jewish family can make us, both individually and collectively, richer, stronger, and more interesting, both as individuals, but also as a community.
Yeah, I mean, going back to basically, as I was introducing Femi to more and more Jewish traditions, he has a thirst for knowledge. He loves learning new things. And so he would ask me, well, why do you do it this way? And my answer would be, because that's how I've always done it? ? Like answering a question almost with a question of not necessarily knowing why, other than that's how I've always done it. And so for him to kind of guide us together to create these new traditions for ourselves and feeling empowered to do so, and then to be able to take these things that we've done, even back to 18 Doors, back to my organization, and say, hey, Femi and I just did this really cool thing. Let's write about it, or I want to tell my other interfaith friends about it. And they are a big reason why I'm feeling empowered to do things a different way, because 18 Doors does not prescribe the way people do Jewish. They really encourage creativity, they encourage individuality, and it's creating those traditions together that really strengthen us as a couple, because now when somebody asks us, why do you do it this way? I have a meaningful answer for them. And that way we can teach other people who come into our home and say, what is a mezuzah and why do you have it? What's the ketubah? On our mantelpiece, we have our ketubah and then the jump broom right underneath it to like really symbol. And right next to it, we have a glass bowl made of the pieces of the glass that we stepped on. I mean, it's just a really great way to strengthen our identity as a couple, and to also just teach people who come into our home, what this new identity means to us.
Great.
I think for us in my family, I think part of why this has been such a big change for in my family is I didn't really have a close relationship with my grandparents, mostly just because I couldn't. I was unhappy and closed off. Just this summer, I spent almost about a year ago now, I spent a week with each of them, traveling by myself, and it was just a wonderful time. Like, I'm very close with my grandparents these days. I just spoke with my granny this morning, and that's been wonderful. And just, it's just the way we form relationships. It's can be hard when you're a kid who doesn't really know who they are and is struggling with that to then reach out and like form close relationships with grandparents. So I think that's one of the things I'm happiest about. Like, I'm a happier person, and that means I get to form more meaningful relationships with my grandparents and also with everyone in my life. And I love hanging out with them and talking to them because they're really interesting people. And yeah, I mean, I'm currently getting cooking lessons from my granny, so it's, taking it very seriously.
Great. So Roger, you got the last word on that question?
It's really selfishly. As you may imagine, people have stereotypes about clergy. And if I introduce myself as a Methodist minister, I can see all of a sudden the box they want to put me in. And then if I can quickly slip in, oh, and by the way, my daughter-in-law is a rabbi, then it breaks things open. So that's my selfish experience with this, but it is true that for us to share Passover and other holidays with our Jewish family, that's wonderful. Frankly, the Christian holidays, as important as they are to us, it's the religious aspect of it, not the big gathering aspect that's really significant to us. And so so that we don't miss that. Our other son's family lives in Portland, Oregon, and so we've never been able really to spend those holidays with them. And so that's how our family works.
Great. So thank you so much, Roger, Alyx, and Becky. That was very wonderful. I just want to point out a couple of things, that this conversation has been recorded and it will be available on our website in the next days. On behalf of myself and Lee Hindler, my co-founder and president, I want to thank everybody here for participating in our first major call. We invite you to join us for our next video conversation, Carrying It Forward, Sharing Our Values with Our Grandchildren, which is next Wednesday, May 20th at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If you're so inclined, we encourage you to go to our website and see some wonderful articles by Roger and others. And while you're there, perhaps make a contribution to the Jewish Grandparents Network for our work. Most important of all, we want to encourage you to be safe, to take care of each other, and continue to be well. With that, we send our best regards. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.